How have I grown my emotional capacity? How can I continue to grow my emotional capacity? I would argue there's a connection between emotional capacity and emotional agility. I think they go hand in hand. If you don't have the capacity, you're not going to be very agile. If you don't have the emotional capacity, you're not going to be very emotionally agile. So I think as I'm externally processing, you've got to have one in order to have the other. So I think capacity comes first and agility comes second. I'm sure there's a lot smarter people out there than me that would maybe disagree with me. But right now, as I'm processing it, or maybe at least in my own journey, that seems to be what my journey has been. The capacity has come first and then the agility.
Welcome to the EQ Gangster podcast, where you will learn practical tools to grow your mental and emotional health and intelligence to be the best version of yourself, both at work and at home. It is real, raw, and transformational. The journey of emotional growth isn't easy, but it's worth it. I believe in you.
EQ Gangsters. This episode is going to be about emotional capacity. I've got my notes here. For those of y'all that are watching on YouTube, what's up? What's up? What's up? I am grateful for reading. I'm grateful for notes. I'm grateful for writing. I'm grateful for cursive. I'm grateful for shorthand. Yes, I actually took shorthand in high school. I know, crazy. But it's been one of the most helpful things I've ever taken from a learning standpoint, because I take notes all the time. I'm like a mad note taker. So I'll throw in some shorthand to be able to capture my thoughts, which is really cool. So I'm grateful for, what else am I grateful for? I'm grateful for dry erase boards. I'm grateful for different colored dry erase markers. I'm grateful for friends and friendship. I'm grateful for learning. So here's my, and I'm taking my notes here and reading through my notes. This episode is on emotional capacity. And so a couple ways to look at this. What is your emotional capacity? What is the emotional capacity of your spouse, partner, significant other? What's the emotional capacity of your children? What's the emotional capacity of your team? What's the emotional capacity of your boss? What's the emotional capacity of your leadership team, of your executive team? So again, if you've been following along, I've got a new role. So I was doing consulting, executive coaching with Arrowhead Leadership Consulting with my close homie of literally over 3 decades, Eric Lopez, who's the CEO of Arrowhead Leadership Consulting. You can find him on LinkedIn. Then I went on a trip for a few months to Israel, during which time I had to, I transitioned my clients to other Arrowhead coaches. Actually 6 of my clients, which I'm very humbled and grateful for, offered me full-time roles with their companies because I was going to have to come back and start over again. And at my age, I was not really looking forward to starting over again from a financial perspective or from a business development perspective. So I was grateful that 6 of my clients reached out and offered me full-time jobs. And so one of my clients offered me a role as the chief people officer, which is an actual thing. I know the first time I heard about a chief people officer was probably 20 years ago, maybe 25 years ago. I went to a John Maxwell keynote speaking engagement with Dan Cathy, at the time, the owner and CEO of Chick-fil-A. They were doing a speaking engagement because they're homies. And now Andrew Cathy, I think, is now running Chick-fil-A, but at the time it was Dan. And Truett is the founder, the granddad. Anyway, so I sit in front of this guy in this auditorium that we were in. And at the end of the event, the guy turned around and he greeted me, and just this super great guy, like just phenomenal. Older guy to me at the time, because I was, 20s or 30s at the time. And he looked to be probably my age now. He was in his 50s or 60s. And I'm like, man, what do you do? He said, I'm a chief people officer for Chick-fil-A. And I'm like, I laughed at him. No, really, what do you do? He said, no, really, that's what I do. And I'm like, there's an actual role in a company called chief people officer. Like, how do I get that job? Right? So, of course, Chick-fil-A, obviously, gazillion-dollar company. And now here I am. I am the chief people officer for this company, and it's been such a blessing. So, but that's one of the questions that I've been asking myself is, I've got an awesome CEO of the company, great guy, and he comes from a monster company, huge company. And he and I have similar, so we went to the same school. He's a West Point grad, and so military guy. And he, there's a certain pace, right? There's a certain, pace and an expectation kind of, there's not necessarily, there's no vetting out process, right? And it doesn't matter what school. I'm just saying, because I went to the same school, I know what he went through because I went through the same thing that he did. And so there's a certain amount of trust and et cetera, that you develop with people that go to the same school that you do, the same alma mater. And, at West Point, there's a certain mental, emotional, physical, social, spiritual capacity that you have to have in order to make it through that school, in my opinion. Their vetting process is no joke. And, we started with, I think, 15,000 applicants. 1,500 got accepted, or maybe 1,400 got accepted. It was like 14,000 applicants, 1,400 got accepted, and graduated 900. And so anyway, so there's whatever those percentages are. I'm not a math guy. So whatever those percentages are, but you had to have a certain capacity. Well, being able to work intimately in a company now versus as a consultant, right? You kind of bebop in, you kind of are in for a day or two and then you're out. Then you go to another company, you're in for a day or two and then you're out. So you don't really, as a consultant who's kind of in and out like I was, you don't have the ability to assess the emotional capacity of a team like someone can who's embedded in the organization. And so it's been really fascinating now that I'm embedded intimately into this company, to see the emotional capacity of the people in the company, and the emotional capacity of the leaders, and the emotional capacity of the team members. And if that has never been developed before, what does that development look like? What does it look like to develop one's emotional capacity? So that's something to chew on. That's something I'm chewing on. How have I grown my emotional capacity? How can I continue to grow my emotional capacity? I would argue there's a connection between emotional capacity and emotional agility. I think they go hand in hand. If you don't have the capacity, you're not going to be very agile. If you don't have the emotional capacity, you're not going to be very emotionally agile. So I think as I'm externally processing, you've got to have one in order to have the other. So I think capacity comes first and agility comes second. I'm sure there's a lot smarter people out there than me that would maybe disagree with me. But right now, as I'm processing it, or maybe at least in my own journey, that seems to be what my journey has been. The capacity has come first and then the agility. Again, I could be wrong, but that's how I see it right now, from the spot I'm at right now. And so now I'm asking myself, okay, not only how can I continue to develop my own capacity and agility emotionally, but how do I do that at scale? How do I do that with my team? With my HR team? How do I develop their emotional capacity and emotional agility? And then not just that, but then again, at scale, how do I develop that across the whole company? How can I develop an entire company of leaders that increase their emotional capacity and therefore emotional agility? Because, nowadays with technology and stuff, it's change or die. If you don't adapt, you'll be irrelevant. How many companies have gone through that? Circuit City. You guys remember Circuit City? Blockbuster are just two off the top of my head. I'm sure there's hundreds of them. I'm sure. I know there are hundreds of them that have come and gone, literally just in the last decade, maybe the last 2 decades. So you think about the number of companies that are, and they were huge companies. Oh, they're too big to fail. Blockbuster was monster. Redbox, huge. Don't even exist anymore. So it's adapt or die. Well, in order to adapt, you need to have leaders who have the emotional capacity and emotional agility to adapt. And change for many people, I would argue most people, is not always comfortable or convenient. And some people fight change just for change's sake. What if people had fought the Model T, right? The vehicle. And they did. No. Everyone knows horses is the best way to get around and move about and stuff. Well, what if Ford did not have the emotional capacity, emotional agility, resilience, grit, determination to cool, rock your horses. In the meantime, I'm going to be developing the automobile, right? Which, again, now we all look back at well, that's not even a question. But what changes might you be fighting that in the long run is better for you or your team or your organization or your family, but you're fighting it just because it's change? So what are some ways that you can increase your own emotional capacity and emotional agility? And how can you help your organization be better, do better at that as well? Another concept to throw in there is learning velocity. What is your learning velocity? The speed at which you can learn a new thought or concept. What's the learning velocity of your team? What's the learning velocity of your organization? And how do you develop that? And again, I would argue there's a connection or relationship to emotional capacity, emotional agility, and learning velocity. You've got to be mentally and emotionally able and willing to learn at faster and faster speeds. So anyway, that's just another little concept to throw in there, but I'd love to hear from you. But that's literally what I'm doing within this organization is building emotional capacity and emotional agility among the organization, among my team, among my team, and within the organization. So I'd love to hear from you guys. What have been some ways that you have developed your own emotional capacity and emotional agility, and what are some ways you develop your team's or organization's emotional capacity and emotional agility.